What I want to do is I want to kind of tell you a little bit about my business now. It's a pork business, so I guess many of you are not pork farmers, but I guess there's elements of what we've done and how we've done it which I hope will be relevant. So I'm going to tell you the key points of our business, but I'm going to kind of gloss over that a little bit so we can concentrate on why and how and, you know, where did you mess up, how did you mess up. I might even save a few of you quite a lot of money because we've made some right royal mistakes in the process. A little bit about our story. I'm a third generation farmer. It's a medium-sized business. I farm with my brother, Paul. I'll talk about later why and how we went from a commodity producer, but just to give you a flavour of where we are now. I have a farming business. It's in a temperate area of the UK. I've got 450 acres of arable land. That accounts for about 5% of my turnover. But my main business is pigs. It's on around about 150, 180 acres. Pigs are all outside, so my main business is pork business. Where I employ 9 people at farm level, okay? I have a business partner who employs about 130 people. So he's the guy that butchers, packs, cuts, processes. My role in the whole thing, I own the brand. I spend my time managing the farm, looking after the farm. I support distributors around the world, so I will spend time with them. We have about 500 chefs a year visit the farm. I will be involved in all of the branding, all of the marketing, all the supply chain setting up. So I'll be heavily involved in every single project until we get it to a point where I can pass it over to his team, who will then run it, and then I'll support the project. My business partner delivers to 600 restaurants daily in the UK, and he handles all the exports and stuff. A few of the people we work with, just to give you an idea of the kind of people we work with, Gordon Ramsay, we work with him in all the countries he operates except America. Jason Aquishard, that's in the Aquishard building. Hessen Blumenthal, you've probably heard of him. There's a guy called Jason Atherton, this guy here. It's got 22 restaurants around the world. He's been opening restaurants in Asia at a very great rate. It's a highly regarded protege of Gordon Ramsay. You've got the Savoy, the Dorchester, Jamie Oliver Group. We work with them across the world. We work in all their airport sites. He's closed his UK operation, but they've still got franchises in airports and in cruise ships. We do stuff with them. British Airways we work with in the UK, lots of Michelin star chefs. When they ran the Olympic Games in the UK, which was a totally unbranded exercise, there's 4 main sponsors. I think it was Sainsbury's, Pepsi and a couple of others. They removed all branding from the Olympic Games apart from us and a Stilton manufacturer. Why did they do that? Because the Olympic Games wanted to demonstrate, you know, we're not totally corporate. There's a couple of small businesses here. So we get quite often we're the token farmer for a big business, if you can understand that. The Olympic Games was one. We work with contract caterers. Sodexo's a top UK one, so they'll feed city buildings. So we supply contracting 85 public schools or private schools. So it's your Eton, your Wellington, etc. Harrods, Fortnum and Masons. So we have a portfolio, huge range of businesses we deal with. It could be the pub down the road. It could be, you know, the guy you see on TV. It could be a football club. Could be anything. We work with a multitude of businesses, and we interact with an awful lot of them. Abroad, we work with 19 different countries. We've been exporting for 6 years. One of the very interesting things about what we do, because we're so keyed into that London food scene and have been for many years, what we've found with the export thing, it's London chefs moving abroad that opens our markets, or European chefs who've worked in London. To give you an example, this year we started trading with Antigua, St. Lucia and Greece. How did those countries happen? Random phone calls. Got a phone call from Greece one day, distributor. One of my chefs has been to the UK. He ate your pork in 2 restaurants, and bear in mind, you know, we're in the right restaurants. So the guys delivering the product can make a good job of it. This guy wanted for Greece. How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to do that? So had a chat to him, checked him out online, seemed like a reasonable fella. And I said, look, the only way we deal with this is I'm coming on a plane at the earliest opportunity. I'm bringing a load of samples. I want you to put 20 chefs in a room. We'll do a tasting. We'll tell the story. If your chefs want it, then we have a market. If they don't want it, well, fine. I'm going home. I've wasted 2 days of my life. It's no big deal. So that's how we tend to open these markets, if you like. We are trying to be proactive rather than reactive. So we did a big food show the other day. We've got a bit of interest from Canada, 1 or 2 other places, but generally we're reactive to the market. So like I say, 19 different countries. We've got a great portfolio. Jumeirah Group in Dubai. That's all your, it's all your real top places in Dubai. Interestingly, in Dubai, if you want to serve pork in a restaurant, you've got to have a pork license. You have to have a second kitchen, a second dishwasher, and all the rest of it. So the only guys selling pork in Dubai really are the higher end restaurants, and what they want to do is serve a better pork. So Dubai's been pretty good to us. Raffles Singapore, we're really proud of working with those guys. Seychelles. Our biggest export business is with Cathay Pacific, first and business class. Cathay Pacific have got a catering unit in Hong Kong. It supplies all the food for their flights, and it does the food for 70 other airlines. They make 100,000 meals there a day. It's a big facility. You've got the same thing in London. You'll have the same thing here in Australia. I did a presentation to Cathay Pacific a few years ago. We got the contract. We thought it was going to be huge, but it all depends on what time of day the plane flies as to whether they put a breakfast bacon on, or whatever the product is. So we work very, very closely with Cathay. We will visit them at least once a year. We'll sit down with them. We'll talk about their menu development for the following year. We'll talk about what more unique or interesting products we can put before them. I should have sort of said earlier, my business partner, he's multi-species. So for him working with me, he's a much bigger business than me, but Dingley Dell is the door opening product for him to establish new markets. So within the context of Cathay Pacific, it was all about the pork. He's now selling them beef. He's selling them Lincoln Red beef. He's selling them, branded UK beef by breed, and he's doing some really interesting cuts for them. So Cathay are our biggest, like I said, they would be our biggest single person. We've just been
Mark.
Sorry.
So I'll start to annoy him now.
You're alive then.
Yeah. So on the Cathay Pacific story, just elaborate a bit on how you got that presentation, because there will be people in the room thinking, so how do you get in front of these companies? How does a little pig farmer from Suffolk get in front of a huge corporation like Cathay Pacific to tell their story?
Okay. Well, when we first went to Hong Kong, I didn't obviously really know much about the food scene there. Obviously went in blind, made a load of mistakes. I've got a friend of mine who was the head chef at Eton, you've all heard of Eton, the school in the UK. Now, Eton is run by a contract caterer. You'll have the same scenario in Australia, I guess. So this guy's job was his day job was to run Eton. But whenever Sodexo wanted to cook for somebody really important, they'd use this guy. So they flew him all around the world. If the Chinese ambassador or the Australian Prime Minister was to visit the UK, chances are they would be taken to Eton to have a meal. This guy would cook for them. So a very well-connected guy. He happened to run the UK Culinary Olympics team, which we sponsor, or we do now. So there is this kind of Culinary Olympics. Anyway, this guy, Michael, lovely fella, I said to Michael, I'm going to Hong Kong, is there any way you can help me? And he said, you need to go and speak to this German guy who was running a hotel he was in Hong Kong somewhere. And he said, if you go and see him, he's running the Hong Kong culinary team, he's very well connected. So when I see this guy, he gave me a list of all the chefs in Hong Kong that belonged to this society. He gave me a list of probably 300-400 chefs and their email addresses. I went back to the UK. I didn't email anyone whose was a private email account, but everybody else, I emailed them, this is me, this is my brand, I'm coming over. And one of the first people to come back to me very quickly was Cathay Pacific, their exec chef, and he said, very interested in what you're doing, come and see me. Went to Cathay Pacific, gave them a presentation. Bear in mind, Cathay Pacific, huge company. They're doing air travel. So, and like most food service businesses, very, very few of the items that they have on their menus can you trace to one farm. In fact, we're probably the only, I suspect we're the only product Cathay Pacific use they can trace to one farm. So we're not a big volume supplier to them. We do first and business class, 14 people in first class, 55 in business class, a hell of a lot of people sit in the back. So the volumes are quite low. For Cathay Pacific, we are a token farmer we can use for their credentials. If you go on their website tonight, you will see bits about my farm. Their team have come over. I've got access to some of the senior people in that business. Why? Because we are a validation, if you like, in terms of Cathay Pacific. Look how carefully we source our pork, okay? And that kind of goes with a lot of these big companies. So, did a big demonstration with Cathay. They've come over, they've seen the farm, and hopefully we're going to be trading with those guys in 10 years' time. Because that's, as a business, that's what we're about. We're about building close ties, end users, so we've got regular volume, and we can innovate with these people. So that's a bit about the people we deal with.
And the executive chef shared with me, page 9 of the case study, Dingley Dell is one of the most outstanding meat products I've seen in recent years. 2 points that come out of that is the strength and the importance of your networks. The strength and importance of your networks, that came through trial and error, and word of mouth. So chefs talk to chefs, chefs trust chefs, and the fact is you have an introduction from somebody who Jorg trusted.
Yeah, I mean, the chef world's really interesting because, it's probably the same here. It might not be actually because you're in a different part of the world, but they move around all the time, these guys. We interact with all the catering colleges in the UK. We offer farm tours. A lot don't take it up, we're too far away. But we run events, we interact with youngsters. When restaurants send teams out to visit us, we'll get people in all the positions in those restaurants. So the guys visiting us now might not have much of a job, but in 10 years' time, they might have a really serious job in the food world. So we treat everybody we meet as a potential customer for now or a potential customer for the future. And they're all linked in. It's a very, very, very small world, food services. It's unbelievably small world. And we are going to talk through the sort of process of how this went, because we tried supermarkets, it went wrong. There's all sorts of interesting stuff to come out later. But I wanted to give you a snapshot of what our USPs are and what we think are really, really important. This next bit is our way of looking at sustainability. So if you remember, I've got 350 acres of arable land. We grow wheat, we grow barley. We've got 50 acres of low-lying marshes, very, very beautiful, but we can't really farm it, so it gets grazed. And then we've got our pig enterprise. So as a business, we are responsible for 3 different areas of landscape, if you like, 3 different ecosystems, I like to think of it. We were very lucky, this is a picture of my brother. When we grew up, my father was very much into conservation, so we were that way minded, and the farm was run in that kind of way. So we've always done an element of conservation. Up until about 4 or 5 years ago, lots of chef days, lots of chefs coming out. We never showed them the conservation side of what we did. We just showed them the pigs. We did butchery, we did some nice food for them, we showed them the pigs, we explained the meat sides. We started to involve these guys. This happens to be this fella here on the right. He's the fella that's in charge of 85 private schools in the UK. So he's got a big job. He also does Sweden and he does Ireland. He's a guy with a big job. This is a field of wheat. What would normally happen in the UK, that field of wheat would cover that whole field, okay? And it'd be fantastic. We would spray it, we'd get a brilliant yield per acre from it, but it didn't support wildlife. Nothing lived in that field of wheat because it's going to challenge our yield. So what we're doing in every single arable field is we're planting large areas of nectar-rich flowers to support wildlife. So the project we're running at the moment is what we're saying is, right, we are responsible for these 3 different environments. I want to be able to say to you guys, I have a sustainable farming business. The way I can demonstrate that, if I can measure the species and diversity of species across my farm, if I can prove to you that year on year, the ecosystem on my farm gets bigger, then in my mind, that's a very tangible point to make. Well, we know as farmers, it's soil conditioning. It's a multitude of different things that's going to look after the planet. Plant-based agriculture is not the solution. So I feel as farmers, we're entering a period where those of us that are producing meat, we've got to produce it in a way that we can stand up and say, actually, we're producing meat, but at the same time, we're improving our environment. And the environment, in my mind, is the area that we farm. And the way we prove that is we tangibly improve the number of species on the farm. So how do we do that? Well, we get more insects on farm. If we get more insects, we get more birds, we get more small mammals. So pretty straightforward scenario. So what do we do around the farm, or what do we do now? We're running a project called 1 Million Bees on Farm. We want to be able to, UEA, who Andrew works for, the local university, are now involved. So we're going to have some good independent auditing of those numbers. I want to create a scenario where on one day, at some stage, I have 1 million bees on farm. Now we're not talking about honeybees, because honeybees are domestic farmed animals. Parts of the world hand pollinate, parts of the world including Australia, California, you're moving honeybees around almond orchards to pollinate them. I'm talking about native bumblebees. That's what we're interested in. In the UK, they live in colonies of 300. Why is there a problem with bees? Well, I can tell you in the UK, there's a problem with native bumblebees because since World War II, we've been trying to produce more food. 97% of wildflower meadows have gone in the UK. 76% of bee forage plants have gone in the UK. So what happens in the life cycle of the bumblebee? She comes out in late April, May, the end of spring. There's enough food for her, she's a single queen. She starts to build her colony up in June, July, August. So the colony needs a lot of food. What does the countryside grow in the UK June, July and August? It's a monoculture. We're growing wheat, we're growing barley, we're growing first generation potatoes so they don't produce nectar. We grow some rapeseed, but that's generally harvested by June the 2nd. So basically the bee that's living in the countryside, which we all farm, it has no food. So the colony doesn't have a successful breeding season. So each year the number of bees go down. Our thinking with our project is we're going to provide oodles of food through June, July, August. We're actually growing 36 hectares, so about 75 acres of nectar-rich plant. So in the context of our business, about 25% of the whole area we farm, we're growing nectar and providing an environment for wildlife. Okay? Now, some of that land mass, we will then put pigs on once the nectar's has been used, if you like. So we're not taking out 25% of our production by any means. What we're doing is we're looking at how we farm and make nature inclusive. Like I said, we're third year of this project. So this is our breeding herd. We've got 1,000 sows. So we're farming them in strips. These green areas should have had pigs in them at the time, but they didn't. So you can see what happens. You farm the strip. The green area in that scenario, there was about 40% white clover undersown. So the white clover would come through, the bees would feed. Once they stopped feeding, we'd just put the sows, we'd just flip the paddocks onto that, then we'd re-drill there. This is a plant called Facilia. It grows in Australia, it grows in your deserts. It's a member of the lavender family. It's a beautiful blue colour. It produces huge amounts of nectar, and it's accessible to a huge range of bumblebees, because bumblebees, their feeding program is governed by the length of their tongue, and for some reason this plant can appeal to short-tongued bumblebees, long-tongued bumblebees. That will flower for about 4 to 5 weeks. So what we do is we plant tranches of that in a staggered fashion, so that we might have 6 weeks in bloom, another tranche comes in bloom for 6 weeks. You can go back and top that lot, just cut the heads off with a flail mower, it will grow again. Very drought resistant. On a hot summer day, we will measure quite comfortably 10 to 14 bumblebees per square metre. So you grow 2 hectares of that, 20,000 square metres, 15 bumblebees, you're up to whatever that is, 300,000 odd bees on one tranche alone. And I think what we're going to see over the next 10, 15 years, I think anybody involved in the food industry, I think this is going to be bigger than animal welfare, personally. I think this is going to be a huge movement about how we produce food. And, okay, this is a pig farm, but it's relative to whatever we're growing. I don't know who your big bread brand in Australia is. In the UK, it's a brand called Hovis. So they're buying wheat for their bread. If I was Mr. Hovis right now, I'd be saying to all my wheat farmers, right, I want all of you to grow 5% of your cropping land. I want you to put into flowers. Take out the shit 5%. I'm going to pay you a small premium, because unless the manufacturer, processor, stroke retailer pays the farmer to do this properly, it's not going to be done properly. So it's got to be done properly. And then he's got a bread on sale in the supermarket that's supporting nature. So for me, this is very early days. Nobody in the UK is doing this. We are promoting it for our business, which is great. But I am desperately trying to inspire other farming businesses to do it, because I can make my farm really nice for nature, but that isn't going to make a bugger all difference unless multiple farms in the UK doing it. So I'm trying to really promote this idea, and as farmers, this is pretty tangible, it's easy to explain, and it's very, very easy for, to explain it to a retailer or a food processor. So that's crimson clover. We grew that this year. That looks fantastic. That was behind this. You can see a tent. We've got 100 of them, so it's quite a big area. We undersowed it with crimson clover. Crimson clover looked absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, only flowers once in the year, and you get about 2 weeks of feeding bees, and that's your lot. So while it looks beautiful, it's not the best thing to grow. We've grown sainfoin, bird's trefoil, a huge plethora of different plants, but you kind of get what we're trying to do. That's a common carder bee. I've become I was a pig boar, I've become a bee boar as well now. But the bee resonates. We've took the bee as the signature creature because everybody knows there's a bee issue. President Obama, first day in office, first thing he was going to do was solve the bee issue in America. He didn't. The United Nations 2 years ago had 115 nations, the very first World Bee Day. So governments are concerned about it. This is a great project. I think this needs to be market-led initiatives. This needs to be the sort of thing we as farmers do. Improves our profile, improves our chance of creating markets, and I think this has to be passed on directly to the consumer somehow through the supply chain. But I can tell you now, our costings on doing this, it's nothing. It's a relatively small amount of money to pay. It hugely inspires staff at farm level. To see all this going on around us, we've always done a bit, but to do it on a grand scale, it's a lovely project. So that's covering off the sustainability thing, which I'm encouraging every single food brand to think about. Even if they don't grow the food, source your food, talk to your growers, because I think this is the next big thing. And I've even chatted to all the people we work with in Asia, and unbelievably, they think it's a good thing, and they get what we're trying to do.
Mark, you are an amazing person, and I know it's in your
There's
DNA.
something coming.
Well, no, it's in your DNA. Your dad brought you up to respect the environment. It's all important. But isn't it fair to say too that you have been significantly, I'm going to say blown away, surprised by how much interest the chefs have taken into that part of the business. When you started to invite chefs to your business, you thought it was all about the meat, it was all about the pigs, and in fact, the extent to which the chefs have taken an interest in the way you manage your business surprised you, but it gave you some additional impetus to carry on doing what you've done and become an expert in bees.
Yeah. But when you put something like this in front of them, which is massively tangible, I'll give you an instance. When our farm, our main sort of office, is here, our pigs are here, 4 miles away, and our arable land is here. So we go from my farm, we drive down the road and they can see all our arable fields, they can see flowers, they can see... We do the same for wild birds, actually. I haven't mentioned that, but we grow wild bird mixes. So they can see all of this. We then drive 3 miles through God knows how many different farmers' land. They don't see anything. They don't see a single flower. And they get it then because they're like, why don't these people support nature? I don't know. Can't be bothered. You know, want to squeeze every kilo of wheat out of that field. So the stark contrast we get from just driving down to where the pigs are is enormous. And they're like, why don't they do it? Well, they're waiting for the government. But you're not. You're doing it off your own back. Yeah, but we believe in it. So it's a real powerful message. And I think it's probably something that, you know, we had it in the UK, you probably had it here, we had the organic movement. It was reasonably successful. Never really worked for meat, or particularly didn't work for pork or chicken. Why? Because feed is 65% of your feed cost. You start feeding organic feed, organic raw materials, you massively increase the cost of production. You grow organic carrots, it costs you too much. You grow probably organic beef, organic lamb. You start trying to do it with something that you're feeding compound feeds, it doesn't work. It adds too much cost. So I think this is the kind of holistic type scenario commercial farmers can achieve without having the price problem of trying to do it organically, particularly in my sector. I think I explained that all right. I don't know. Some of you are looking bemused and puzzled, but yeah, so third generation farmers, our aim, that was our aim. Our aim is still, we are massively driven every single day to do the best we can in terms of animal welfare. Animal welfare for me is partly production system, but it's mainly human-animal interaction. If you visit my farm, I promise you, my breeding stands will approach you within 30 seconds. Why? Because we're handling them, we're talking to them, we're creating a stress-free environment for the animals, but we're also creating a system, if you want to be completely ruthless about it, I'm creating a system where chefs step on my farm, and they're approached by animals very quickly. They can step on any farm they like in the UK, they will not achieve that. The reason they won't achieve it is because we work on that. You know, that's what we want. We want those animals relaxed. You know, I don't pay the wages, the pigs do, so my staff know, you know, it's all about human-animal interaction. It's hugely important. How do you demonstrate it on farm? Well, easy. You have animals that approach people and interact with people. They love it. You know, you've got to remember a lot of these chefs, they've never seen a farm before. No matter what you're farming in this room, I guarantee you, most chefs, most retailers, most retail managers never stepped on a farm before. They haven't seen the passion that you do stuff. They haven't seen the environment you do in it. They don't realise the wildlife you support. Having a farm, getting decision makers on your farm is massively powerful. They visit processing factories. It's a factory. It's white, it's clean, it's lovely, but it's not nature. So getting people on farm, showing them what we do and take advantage on a daily basis is massively empowering for these people. You know, so we try and involve them in all aspects. Really interesting part of what we do, I think, the most interesting part of what we do. We were talking earlier about commodity production. The UK is a huge commodity producer, okay? What's happened since the Second World War? Massive rush to produce more food. So what's happened is the genetics companies, everybody, let's grow that carrot quicker, let's grow that potato quicker, let's grow that pig quicker. A chicken, 35 days to slaughter, it was probably 100 days. We've concentrated on The farming industry, through no fault of their own, have been led to produce more. The retailer wants the product cheaper. How have we responded to that as farmers? We've tried to increase yield and output. Have we had a conversation about taste? No, we haven't. You know, we start our brand, we made a few decisions on taste early on. We get to the point we're supplying a lot of fine dining guys in London. And we're kind of sitting there thinking, well, they all do a taste test, they put it on the menu, it must be right. I'm walking around the farm one day, and typically, like, you know, you can run a business for bloody years and you never really stop and sit and think about it from a, I don't know, you know, completely alternative view. I'm walking around the farm one day and I think to myself, look, I'm not a pig producer anymore, I'm a food producer. And then I thought, right, I need to put some proper science behind what I'm doing. I really need to understand. I've got great welfare credentials, but hey ho, can't eat welfare, can't taste welfare. So I became very fixated on meat science. I happened to run into one of the breeding companies in the UK. I don't want to make this too much about pigs, because I'm aware most people probably never seen a pig in the room, some who have seen a pig. But basically, suddenly, what is taste? How does it operate? Now, in the pork world, at the top, number one, normal commercial pork the world over. Everybody does it like this, you know, Canada, America, Mexico. If you look at it, it's a complete absence of marbling or intramuscular fat. Intramuscular fat is a little white fat running through the pork. That's where your taste comes from. Widely understood in the beef industry. Go into food service, they get that. They're buying Japanese Wagyu at probably 400 Australian dollars a kilo. You know, it's full of fat, doesn't taste like beef, it's incredibly interesting flavour. You then have your kind of hybrid Wagyu programs, but less marbling, but great flavour, your Black Angus programs. So the beef industry, widely understood. In the pork industry, not at all. Number two is where my average production is now, across my 400 animals a week. Number three is where I hope to get to. What have I done? How have I gone about that? I have set up my own breeding company. I have set up my own, what's called a nucleus herd. So I'm breeding my own breeding animals. A normal commercial farmer will go to market, he'll buy his breeding females from there, and his males from there. They have been naturally selected over generations to grow quicker, to convert their food more efficiently. I've said, right, I'm setting up my own breeding program, and we are selecting for marbling. We brought in technology from America that allows us to scan a live animal. So we can identify the level of marbling in the live animal, and we can then select the best marbled ones and we can breed from it. There are two people in the world doing it. There's me, there's someone in Korea. I'm a small family farm in Suffolk. Most of you won't have heard of it. It's on the arse end of England, up the top, near the sea. It's crazy. And that's where we've got to, I feel, as agriculture. And I feel those of us that are operating in markets where we have high cost of production can't compete with these other guys. We've got to look for, what are the drivers, how do we need to change? Now we're taking this to an extreme level, but I really feel the food industry, and there are many products within the food industry that need to take a step back and say, hang on, what is flavour? How are we going about this? So, like I said, in the pork world, beef world's different. You can barley feed them. There's various things you can do. They're a ruminant. In the pork world, you're only going to get taste by this kind of program. So, just at the top, you know, we run pure what they call nucleus red Durocs. We scan them for marbling. The very best ones go back in the pyramid, and eventually they produce a breeding female and a male. So, you know, I won't dwell on it too much, because those of you that are growing plants, you really don't want to hear too much about that. That's a scanner. That is about 1% of our output, okay? That's as extreme as it gets with us. My goal over the next, however long it takes, might be 2 or 3 years, we're improving the marbling 15% a year. I want to get 10 to 15% of my production at that level, because I know I could take that product to any distributor in Asia, and I could probably treble or quadruple my price point. I absolutely know that. They're paying that level, they're paying a huge amount of money for marbled Wagyu beef. If I can get 10% of my production like that, it's going to revolutionise my business. I put the genetic program in place. I've just got to let nature take its course. So if you like, part of what we're doing, we're challenging the perceptions of the pork industry. We have people on farm, we're challenging their perceptions. This is how we farm. You know, we spend money. We've got a great team of people. We look after the animals. You don't have to cook it. Eat it medium rare. You know, look at the science behind what we're doing. So a lot of what we do is really trying to challenge people's perception of pork. Very quickly blast through this. The concept was take a pork steak to market. If you go into any restaurant in the UK, beef steaks is the norm. They only have a really cooked pork belly. Same thing in lots of different markets. We're saying, well, hang on, you guys, use a pork steak, cook it like beef, present it like beef. It's a cheaper product. You, the restaurant, can make great margins out of it. You know, use a high welfare, high marble. Don't overcook it. And if they can make good money out of us, they're going to continue using it. So sort of innovation sometimes in how we take concepts. We just built a charcuterie factory, so that's what we're kind of messing around with now. We're about 4 months into selling. That's a really whistle-stop, I don't know, I've probably really gone on long enough, but that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of what we do now. I think the whole point was to try and tell you how we started. And
So a couple of things there. This is an incredibly inspirational and fascinating story. But if we left it now, you would believe that Mark had this vision 8-9 years ago, where he saw this market for the most amazing tasting pork produced in a system that saved the planet and resulted in people buying into a concept that had evolved systematically, strategically, where in fact it evolved out of a fundamental failure with a significant part of the market where most of us have grown up focusing on, which was UK supermarkets, which you have completely ignored. So you wouldn't be where you are now had you not repeatedly failed in a market sector where you and the rest of the meat industry in the UK had focused almost exclusively on. So you need to tell them what happened when you launched this.
To give you an idea, why did we start a brand? Back in the 90s, late 90s, we were commodity pork producers. Sterling was incredibly high. The UK government brought in a raft of welfare measures, which meant UK farmers had to totally change at great expense their farming methods. However, that didn't apply to imports. So the UK vis-a-vis Europe was so out of kilter. There was an oversupply anyway, so you've got the perfect storm. Over a period of 10 years, the UK pig industry halved. I saw many of my friends go out of business. I personally know 2 or 3 people that committed suicide during that period. It was awful. We as farmers, we rebelled, we shut down supermarket distribution centres. We were very aggressive, we didn't know how to deal with it, and it was a very unpleasant period, and it was my 30s. I realised I had to find a solution I wanted to farm, I enjoy farming pigs, but because I was a commodity producer, I was interchangeable. I was the primary producer. We don't want to buy it from you, we'll get it from Belgium. You guys know the score with all this. So I realised, and I still stick by this, it took me a long time to realise it, if I start my own brand, if it has traction, and we initially went for supermarkets, if the customer's picking it up, if the supermarket's making its margin, the supply chain has to deal with me, and I will have the future. So we started by creating a brand purely to give ourselves, as an ex-commodity producer, a place in the marketplace where we were, not only we were valued, but we were probably the most important part of the supply chain, because if we don't put a pig on a lorry, the brand doesn't exist. So that was how we started. We originally started in supermarkets because They take volume, that's what everybody does. Andrew was sort of involved with us. We started with a local cooperative. They had 68 stores, so we found a partner that could retail pack. We cracked on with those guys. We were cooking in store. It was all going quite well. Probably went well for about 2 years, if I remember. We then got into 2 of the nationals, Tesco, first Tesco's, then Asda. And we got a sausage into Tesco's. I can't think of, I've had way more than 100 days, probably 200 days in my life cooking in supermarket stores in order to push the brand on. Didn't work. Why didn't it work? Firstly, the mindset of the supermarket, the only conversation they want to have with, or wanted to have with us, is margin per metre shelf space. There's nowhere else to go with the discussion. It's a shit discussion. We didn't have the budget. We didn't have the knowledge. You know, we were, so we had a go at it, and then we fell into food service. We soon realised in food service, if I can convince that chef to put me on his menu, I'm going to be on his, whatever pork item he puts on his menu is going to be mine. So we kind of, you know, we drifted away from supermarkets.
Yeah, that's good. I'm just reminding you, and for the benefit of the audience too, before you got into supermarkets, your herd was wiped out.
Yeah, I mean, typical, you know, everybody farming in this room, you know what it's like. You know, we had a problem called swine dysentery, probably when I was about 25 years old, so we got rid of all the pigs altogether. You know, we came back as bigger commodity producers, market dropped out on us. We lost a huge amount of money over 10 years. I was saying to Andrew earlier, you know, we're not a particularly big business now. We were probably a third of the size at the time. I can remember at the worst period, I went to work every day for 6 months, 180 days, and at the end of every day, I owed the bank another £1,000 at its worst. Now, it messes with your head, it messes with your family life, it messes with every aspect of your life. I didn't want to go back there. So that's why we didn't get bounced into it, but probably had I not had economic adversity, I probably wouldn't have been clever enough to do this, because I probably wouldn't have had to do it. I'd have been, you know, drifting along, producing a few pigs, making a few quid, life would have been right. But because it was appalling, we had to really, really, really rethink the model of how we went about it. And a lot of what we're doing is we're just future-proofing ourselves from ever going back to that scenario. You know, I have a fixed price for what I do, and we make it work, and we manage that market in a way that, you know, we keep it interested. I do not want to go back to commodity production, because we're in the UK, you cannot compete with Mexico, you cannot compete with Canada, you cannot compete with China. Forget it, it's not going to happen. So, you know, there has to be some form of sensible diversification.
So, as Sue in the introduction made the point, control, we've had lots of conversations where you shared with me the desire and the need to take control as opposed to being controlled. But it's important, a really important feature of the Dingley Dell story, which is common with the other 2 case studies and many, is the extent to which Mark has made many mistakes, but has been absolutely focused on learning from those mistakes and moving on, with the conviction that the fundamental proposition of his business had value, and a determination to discover the appropriate place to develop that opportunity. Now, when you launched with Tesco, when you went into that initial phase of your brand, the fundamental positioning was outdoor rear pork, welfare-friendly meat. And there was no reference anywhere on the packaging or the positioning of taste. There was no budget to support the launch of a product in a mainstream supermarket who was positioning themselves as the place where you can get special products as well as mainstream products. And the assumption that you made, Mark, was that Tesco had all of this sorted. You'd be in the right 45 stores, people would be rushing to the counter to buy your outdoor reared pork, where actually penetration turned out to be in all of those stores less than 1%. So nobody was buying the product. And the outcome of that was, I'm going to find another supermarket who might do this better, with no budget, who had a strategy of everyday low price for their products. That was Asda. So we failed in one retail store with a proposition that was based on welfare, because the average, the consumers pushing around their trolleys around a Coles or a Woolies or a Tesco aren't thinking about the welfare of the animals. There was, as it happens, a taste proposition bubbling under the surface, but it was only when you failed in retail that you thought about where have we gone wrong, and you became obsessed with understanding taste, because you had some traction and you had some interest in a completely different distribution channel, which was food service, where you've got you've got chefs that understand the technical story, the science that went behind the meat, and you have consumers spending significant amounts of money in high-end restaurants that are spending time when they're thinking about what they're going to buy, understanding and buying into the Dingley Dell story. So out of that failure, necessity is the mother of invention. You lost your herd. You then invested in retail, which was going to be the future of the business, and it crashed at a rate of £1,000 a day for God knows how many days. The vast majority of Mark's peers back home, and this is a country where 40% of the beef that's served on supermarket shelves comes from cows that were bred for milk, and that the sheep industry has 120 varieties supplying retailers that are seeking consistency, and 99 out of 100 pig producers are looking for a recipe that reduces their costs and produces consistent shoe leather that people are trying to make meals out of and wondering why they can't make any money. And when Mark says, this is crazy, we need to change, they all start to shuffle in their seats. Because you can't. Farmers can't. It's too expensive. It's too difficult. This is all niche. You can't transfer it to an industry. And what we've been discussing and what we're funding, the UK doesn't export anything of any significant volume apart from...
Just to show you, just to illustrate how competitive UK retail is, and I can only talk about the pork industry, I went on Woolworth's website this morning, and I went on Sainsbury's. So two different retailers, one in the UK, one in Australia. Pork chops in Australia, $16 a kilo. Pork chops in the UK, $7 a kilo. Okay? That shows you how much the retailers are doing that. We failed in retail as a business because we didn't understand retailers, we didn't understand the consumer. We're a bit more savvy now. We try and understand our markets and think things through. But as a domestic producer, that's the market. For all my friends who are pig farmers, who are normal commercial pig farmers, that's it. That's what Mr. Tesco or Mr. Sainsbury's, they're all selling at the same price. That's their price point. $7 Australian a kilo. They're going to have a 40% margin out of that. That doesn't leave much for the rest. The benefit to me, and I believe many farming businesses, to have an export market is you have an option. Even if you can only sell 10 or 20% of your produce at a better margin, you have an option. You don't have a retail gun at your head.
Yeah, so moving on, I guess the background in summary is nobody was making money. You were losing shed loads of money. You thought you had a solution, which was this product offering. It failed, right? Mm-hmm. So now transitioning to food service. So you now need to start to talk about the relationship with direct meats that took you into a world that you weren't that familiar with, the expertise that Martin brought around London, the chefs, and then how we took that to Hong Kong, Singapore, the process of developing those relationships.
Okay, so as a primary producer, right, I've got a great idea, I know how to put a brand together, I've had to learn how to interact with retailers, etc. The very first meeting I had when I started Dingley Dell, I went to see a processor, and I didn't. My branding was nowhere near what it is now. I went to see this guy, and I said, "Look, I've got this idea." He was a bacon manufacturer in Ham. I said, "Look, let's work together, and we're going to have this brand, and we're going to take it to the market, and we can do whatever." And he sat back in his chair, and he said, "Why do I want to buy it off you when I can buy it from Belgium cheaper? F off out of my office now." And I promise you, that was what the meeting was like. And I walked out of that guy's office and I felt about that tall, because I thought, what a dick. So for me to do what I want to do, I've got to find meat partners who understand, who want to collaborate. I've worked with many meat partners over the years. The vast majority have not understood what I wanted to do. I want to get close to the customer. I want them to allow me to do that. Because if that customer connects with my farm, yes, that customer, it's important, the service the meat guy delivers, it's important, everything he does. But I want that end user to have an emotional attachment with that farm, those animals, because that's not a day-by-day thing for these guys. So, that was a stumbling block. How many processors are going to allow you to do that? How many of them are comfortable with it? How many of them trust you? What happens if I pick the phone up one day and say, it's 20% more for my pigs, or you've got nothing going through your factory tomorrow, and you're going to let down some serious people. So there's a huge amount of elements that need to take place. Collaboration, trust, flow of information, all of these things. But what I can say is, why would I, as a primary producer, as a farmer, that's what I love, that's what I'm good at, why would I want to build a processing plant? Why would I want to spend all that energy trying to understand that and do it well? I'm far better off to find a partner to do that. If we have a logistics problem with our Dingley Dell partnership, so if somebody comes along and says, I've got 200 restaurants all the way around the UK, can you service it? My business partner has got a whole load of vans, but he doesn't cover the whole of the UK. What do? We go and seek someone who's got the experience, who's got the efficiency of doing it. It's quite logical when you start to think about it, but it requires business collaboration, it requires enormous trust. It's quite intangible how you look at it sometimes. I was talking to Andrew last night. My business at farm level, we turn over £4 million. It's not a huge amount of money. We sell the carcasses to the processor, okay? He then pays me a royalty on the wholesale value of all of that. And when we develop new products, we charge royalties on it. So we set up some deals. So there's a multitude of ways of getting a bit of money, if you like, from the relationship. But as I was saying to Andrew, he's £15 million turnover business. He wants to double, treble his business. He's a real dynamic character. He's a bigger business, I'm a smaller business. But we have an equal relationship. Why do we have an equal relationship? Because his business moves forward on the back of mine. We open the doors, he can sell stuff around it. Good luck to the guy. We open a market in the Caribbean on the back of Dingley Dell Pork. He then convinces them to buy beef or lamb, or he decides he's going to source something for them. That's his prerogative. So I'm very attuned to the fact that I have to deliver profit for the people I work alongside. I have to be incredibly important to them. If I'm important to them, why would they not look after me? It's a very simple, when you drill down to it, it's a very simple scenario. Trouble is, businesses don't work well together. We all, as farmers, we mistrust the processors, the packers. We don't understand the retailers, we just hate them, that's easy. It's how we operate. So
that is really important. And just before we lose the opportunity, so the Zespri and the Mambaloo stories, this is a really important point. So Zespri don't hate the retailers. They've grown a business that's now worth 4 billion New Zealand dollars. So at the one extreme, you've got a 4 billion corporate branded produce business that have segmented the retail market globally and are working at a strategic level to help their strategic retail customers make more money by selling more of Zespri's kiwi fruit. So that means allocating more shelf space, that means giving them more distribution in parts of the world with retail customers that want to work with them. And how do you get them to work with them? Well, because you're going to make more money, because you can get a premium from stocking our products. Mambaloo are the same with their Kensington Pride mangoes that are hard to grow, but have an eating quality that's really difficult to better. So huge similarities with the Dingley Dell story, and indeed the Zespri, who've got brands and varieties for different parts of the world. A determination even. You said it's their prerogative. I think you're underselling yourself. You want the people that you're selling to make more money as a result of buying your product, because that means they'll come back and buy some more. And that's exactly what Mambaloo are doing with their mangoes. It's exactly what Zespri are doing with their kiwi fruit, but you can't do it with everybody. So one of the key kind of generic insights is you can't do this stuff with everybody. So in a sense, Mark, you found, after many trials and errors of working with partners, there are lots of people that will buy your pigs and cut them up and flog them, but you were looking for something different. You wanted somebody that understood your business model, and you eventually, so it's like, this takes time, 10 years in the making, and we're at base camp in climbing Everest. We're turning over $4 million. Pardon? Pounds in, yeah, so it's worse, yeah, or better. Sorry. But this is just base camp. And most of Mark's peers kind of shake their heads, or why would you do that? There's no way we're going to do that. Well, that's why you're not making any money. That's why you're stuck, just hoping that the exchange rate will flip the other way. You're looking forward to somebody else's crop failure or somebody else's market disaster that you can exploit. Zero control. And so years and years and years of suffering from not having control, moving into a place where you have got some control, maybe just a little bit about that whole kind of partnership development, so the distributors that you work with, and the translation of that they all need to make money and more money as a result of working with you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the lessons we've learned in export is do your research. When we kicked off, we tried to take our London model of products, etc., into Hong Kong, and it didn't work, or it didn't work as well as we'd hoped. So now we're very focused on understanding the market. What cuts do they use? What price points do they have? You know, we really go into great detail when we enter a market. Like Andrew said, finding the right distribution partners is very difficult. Do you go and work with the biggest distributor in Sweden, or do you work with the smallest? If you work with the biggest one, you're probably one of 20,000 products. Is he going to put time into it? Because it's very easy for his salesman to say, hey, Mr. Chef or Mr. Retailer, let me talk to you about Dingley Dell Pork. He starts to get partway through the communicating the story, and the chef or retailer says, yeah, what's the price? So the guy comes out with the price, and he says, bloody, balls to that. What else have you got pork-wise? And because the guy's got a portfolio that includes Canadian pork, he says, well, I've got something half the price from Canada. So that guy hasn't fought that battle for you because he's a distributor with multiple pork products or multiple pork brands from around the world. He's probably not suitable. He would have been if that particular salesperson understood the story, and God Almighty, is that difficult to create communication material that people easily understand. But also, does that salesperson like me? Does, if I pop over there, does he want to do a good job for me? So I put my boots on the ground in every country we operate. Every time I go there, I retrain their salespeople, because I can guarantee you, I can talk to a salesperson for 30 minutes about my brand. I think I've communicated everything, and I'm lucky if 10% sinks in. And that's not me being demeaning about their intelligence. That is the reality of trying to communicate something that you know inside out. You're going to have to repeat that story every time you go and see these people. And if you don't, you're going to suffer because he can't communicate what you're about. So we have real issues. Who do we work with? If you're lucky, you catch somebody on the up. We changed our distributor in Dubai, and both myself and my business partner very similar-minded. You know, I know farmers, you'll all be the same in this room. You're honest, you're decent people. You don't change things easily. It's the code that we operate in that farming world. So to change a distributor, you're honourable people, we're going to work with you. And so you work with them and they think you about and move product. So you're very reluctant to change these people. We changed our distributor in Dubai. We went from probably the biggest, the single biggest distributor in Dubai. We went to a guy that employed about 3 people. Best thing they ever did. Volumes are up probably 6-fold, and right now, contrary to what you're reading there, Dubai actually in the last sort of 2 months, it's now our biggest export market. Why? Because this guy is 40 years old, it's his first business. Dingley Dell is a really important brand to him. No one else has got it in Dubai. What's he doing? He's going into top big hotels in Dubai. You've got a pork kitchen, got this great brand from London, you've probably heard of it, or whatever. He gets that product in there, so it's a massive hotel, let's say it's got 500,000 rooms. The next conversation he has with them, right, at breakfast time, because Dubai is a very price conscious place, your cold cuts, your honeycomb, I've got the cheapest prices in Dubai. He gets in the door with our product, premium product, then he sells them virtually, I don't know, a whole load of items for their breakfast, volume movers, because he's got cheap access. He totally understands how to use this brand. But he works me really hard and we achieve stuff. If I go to Hong Kong, it's like 2 or 3 meetings a day. So choosing the distributor, understanding the distributor, and actually it's sometimes quite easy because if you know other people who've got export brands, you just speak to them, who's the best guy to use in town, or who's got the best portfolio in our case, and who's got the prestigious guys. We want them because they give us credibility.
So Stu's waving at us because we want to get some questions, because I'm sure you've got loads of questions that we should address. Before I hand over, I just want to pick up on a point rather than get you talking again, otherwise we'll be waving again and we won't get on. No. It's the partnering for customer value. What's interesting about Mark's story is, if you read the textbooks, or many consultants will have you believe, there's a 3-step process to heaven, to finding your perfect partner. And at least from my experience, that's not the case at all. It isn't that simple. And the textbooks might lead you to believe that what you need to do is to find a partner that knows it all, because then they'll help you because they know it all. Now, in the case of Dingley Dell and Direct Meats, Martin knew lots of stuff about some things that Mark didn't know anything about, like capturing the London high-end market, but Martin wasn't exporting. So when Mark took Martin, his meat processor, on a government-funded trade mission, if you like, to Hong Kong, wherever it was, that was opening Martin's eyes to a new world. And boy, did Mark's partner get excited about what they could do in conquering the world. And suddenly there's a flip, and you'll see there's many flips in the case study, and the way it's been presented is really good because there's lots of flips in Dingley Dell's story. And then suddenly you go from Mark being led by Martin in understanding and capturing food service, to Martin being led by Mark, who, when they were confronted by, I think it was Hong Kong's second biggest distributor, and Martin getting very excited about this, Mark very coolly said, "No, thank you." Martin saying, "What the heck are you doing? Listen, I have been down this route with large corporations, volume is everything, that don't understand what's special about our business. This doesn't feel right for me. We're not going with the second biggest retailer in Hong Kong." I don't think Martin was too sure about this, but he trusted you. He did trust you. And you chose a distributor that was trying to grow their business, that weren't established, that didn't know everything, but had a footprint and had an understanding of Wagyu beef in Japan. They understood. So it is the kind of dating game, trying to find people, and we call that strategic alignment. It is not simple. None of this is simple. And so why the peers back home kind of poo-poo this, dismiss so much of this story as niche tomfoolery that's of no relevance to us, I'm now exaggerating to make the point, is because it's too hard for them. they have discovered it's really, really difficult, if not impossible, to make money out of producing quality pork. When you produce to a specification, to a price that doesn't cover your cost. That's really difficult. So we're going to work harder at making that work. They haven't understood that it doesn't work. It won't work. It can't work. You've got to get out of that world, which Mark has done. And then the processors in the room, who are part of the problem, not the solution, are equally as uncomfortable that they can't make any money either, having invested in scale to meet the needs of the retailers who won't give them a return on that investment. So they feel very uncomfortable about this too. I think the partnering for customer value, both of those two things are not difficult in mature markets everywhere where competition is intense. So choosing the right partner and identifying the value proposition is not easy. What Mark has done, 4 million, is now 4 million. At the time, it was, I don't know, barely a million. A diddly squat business was behaving like the £4 billion corporate business, which is Zespri. So those 3 case studies in your pack give me the confidence to believe that this, what the story here is not, in principle, a million miles away from Zespri's story or Manbaloo's story. If Mark can punch as much above his weight that he does, then there's no reason for anybody in this room not to be able to do the same, should they have the tenacity and the understanding that there is a science behind the art.
That is a perfect segue.
It was.
Yeah, thank you.
Great story. An incredibly enviable success in leveraging that UK market out into exports. And you said this, your selection criteria for taking on a new business is really, you get the right vibe, you get the right connect, that it feels like the kind of people you're dealing with who understand your business and your product in London. It's a great sounding story, but I suspect, and tell me I'm wrong, that there might be some other things to it. And so that selection of distribution partner, mission critical, as you described, difficult to back away from. How do you make sure you get it right?
Well, I suppose, we are a small business. We are probably a very under-resourced business. It's probably taking us longer to do this than it should have done. But like Andrew said, there's enormous tenacity within, my brother, myself, the people around us. We surround ourselves by extremely good people. We're using the best meat scientists in the UK. The people advising us, incredibly, we select the best people we can to work with us. It's not been easy what we're doing, and what I've wanted to do, there's no outside investment in my business, which has been hugely useful, and with them we can make decisions like the meat science program. Like I said, we're one of 2 people in the world. That's been an incredibly expensive exercise. If I had to justify that to a team of accountants or shareholders, they'd probably say, what on earth are you doing? But I don't know. Andrew, being an academic, will argue I don't know. You saw that picture of that piece of pork I put up there. Absolutely convinced. If I get 10% of my pork like that, I can sell it for any price I want to sell it for, because you can see that in Wagyu. So we've been, if you like, rather than trying to establish ourselves as a really big business, we've been trying to get our model right. It's what I've been concentrating on for the last 4 or 5 years, get the model right. I've met the 3rd biggest pig farmer in China, spent time on my farm. He wanted to look at doing something in China together. 2 weeks ago, I had a guy from China. We are, because what we're doing is quite unique, i.e. meat science, i.e. That kind of approach. It doesn't happen in the pork industry. Why doesn't it happen? I don't know. When we started exporting, I assumed there would be multiple people around the world doing stuff differently. The reality is there isn't. Most people farming are farming to the normal set of rules, the commodity set of rules. So the minute you decide to take yourself out of that game, It places you in a position where there isn't a huge amount of competition. So then it becomes about getting the model right. My models took a long time to get right because I had to make all the mistakes. And who do you turn to for advice with this kind of stuff? So we've been creating the model. It took a long time, lots of mistakes, lots of expense, but we're very comfortable with it. It works. Scaling it up's not an issue. Scaling it up, we've got the genetics, we can find other farmers to work with. That's not the issue. The issue is understanding the consumer, the market, who you talk to as a distribution. It's those pieces of the jigsaw are the really difficult things to put together. Now, obviously, there's loads of people in the room already exporting. I'm sure there's loads of people that are vertically integrated businesses. But when you're approaching this as a primary producer who requires collaboration, finding the partners is very difficult.
Yep, and I'm just going to add then a couple of bits from Zespri and Manbaloo. So from a Zespri perspective, so we're supplying retailers all around the world. They already have their distribution partners in place. So Zespri have no problem with that. They've got no interest in duplicating what already exists, accepting the fact that retailers have their suppliers. So we'll work with so their partners are dictated by their customer who says, well, if you want to supply us, you've got to go through Jim or Susie or whoever. So then Zespri's job, in the same way that Mark wants direct meats to make more money, they're now working with the supplier into the retailer to help them make more money. So the partnership development and the choice of delivery partner at the other end of the spectrum is driven by the retailer that says, this is how you work with us. And if you take a peek at the Manbaloo case study, what's fascinating about them is the extent to which Marie Picconi, the owner-manager of Manbaloo, she took the principles of segmenting customers. And I don't know if they've got the full case study, but there was a table in the case study. She developed her own scoring system. So I'll just read it out to you. So she was thinking, her and her technical expert that helped build their export business. We've got to stop just exporting to whoever will take our stuff, because they're not paying us, because there's failures. There's failures because they don't understand our product. And we can't have you, Scott, going everywhere around the world, helping them to understand better how you import and distribute mangoes, the best tasting mangoes in the world, without screwing it all up. So what should we do? So we'll look at the return to pack house, we'll look at market dynamics, we'll look at the growth potential, we'll look at the effectiveness, efficiency, information flow, and the kind of DNA, the strength of the relationship. And it is a fact, and she would have told a different audience when Marie came to share her story with the businesses, she scored all of their partners on a number of criteria, and then sat down with 2 or 3 senior managers and said, right, we're going to focus on these people because they're scoring highly on the things that matter to us. Now, in the case study, at the end of the case study on Dingley Dell, I make the point that Dingley Dell's strength, and you're seeing a big part of it, it's Mark, is also their Achilles heel. Because we don't have a structured process for identifying this. It so happens that in food service, that's not so critical. Because I've got a product that the technical people, the chefs, understand, I just need to get in front of people. But I can't get in front of more than so many people a day during the course of the year. So having distributors that understand the Dingley Dell story is critical. But there's different ways of doing it. So I think you're priming your question to say it can't just purely be about trial and error, dating until you get somebody that wants to do something serious with you. You're still doing a lot of that, and you're going to run out of steam, and you won't be able to grow your business from 4 to 10 to 20 to $30 million, but you've already alluded to that fact that you're getting to a point, you're not there yet, where you will be able to justify the investment in more people with those skills to do that stuff. So there is more to it. Mark has done amazingly well given the resources that he has in Dingley Dell, not least because they've got a fantastic proposition. Other businesses in other markets and distribution channels would choose those partners for different reasons in different ways. Is that okay? Yeah, so I'll just pick up you asked about the other two case studies, so there's no question that the New Zealand government are a critical factor in the success of Zespri. So what was it, 20 years, the whole kind of no more subsidies, blood on the carpet, big time, and then in I think many sectors, if not all of them, legislation that introduced the principle of the single desk. So we have to collaborate here. We have to export because there's more sheep than people in New Zealand. And so, whatever we're going to do, exports are the way to go. Government recognising that and significant co-investment in the infrastructure, but importantly, the legislation that means that farmers who are inclined to compete with each other don't get the opportunity to undercut the strategy. So I think that the single desk legislation that made it possible, I mentioned today, they voted again last year during the course of me researching this case study. Growing kiwi fruit in New Zealand is unequivocally a license to print money. They are incredibly, the returns per hectare are off the charts, and you still have farmers complaining that they're not free to sell their kiwi fruit to who they want to sell it to. Absolutely ridiculous, nonsensical, introverted, arrogant, all the adjectives that as negative as you can get. Luckily, the majority still think, my goodness me, isn't it amazing that we've got this opportunity? So the R&D program, so absolutely cheek by jowl, government co-investing with Zespri, because this is important for economic, regional, national development, because it's a huge sector. So I think, absolute no-brainer. Manbaloo, so DPI Queensland, same kind of principle. You've got the federal government, right, negotiating the protocols to open up these markets. Takes them, 5, 10 years, or whatever, many years. Who was the one business who were investing ahead of that protocol being secured? The one business. It was Manbaloo. Just like, if you like Dingley Dell, why are you pissing about with all of this genetic stuff? Why are you and all this marbling and what have you? Why are you investing in a VHT treatment plant? Because if we want to export to Korea, we're going to have one. And then guess what? We're not quite sure how this is going to work. So we're going to invest whatever it was, X million bucks in the VHT treatment plant. That means we can exploit the protocol when it's in place. And then, oh my goodness me, we're going to find all sorts of problems with trying to export mangoes that have been VHT treated. And Scott Ledger, an amazing person, similar in so many respects to Dingley Dell and the guys at Zespri. There's nothing you can tell him about growing mangoes, about storing mangoes, about treating mangoes, about exporting mangoes. And Marie says, right, Scott, off you go to South Korea. Right, Scott, off you go to Japan. Right, Scott, off you go to US. Because we're going to have failures. It's going to get into their distribution channel, and they won't look after our very special Kensington pride. You've got to tell them how to do it. That's all time, it's money, and lots of mistakes, lessons from which we will learn. And I think exactly in the same way that Mark is trying to do the impossible in a market that only understands commodities, Manbaloo proudly say, we take on those challenges that nobody else wants to take on because we trust in our ability to crack them. Yeah. So the unequivocal desire to understand, that's what he has. They have a learning orientation that's driven by understanding consumers and a point of difference that's genuine. And that's what Manbaloo have too, and that's what Zespri have too. Whatever the problem is, we will crack it. And we will commit ourselves to cracking it. Read the case study. For 3 years, they struggled in South Korea, massively. But they stuck at it. They stuck at it, and they had a distributor that understood what they were trying to do, really appreciated the fact, says Manbaloo, they were sinking investment into their business to get their distribution of mangoes in South Korea right, and recognising that those mangoes were amazing, if only we could get it right. And they turned it around. It took them 3 years. Most of their peers were looking at them thinking they're crazy.
Question to Mark. With respect to your story that differentiated your product and marbling, which contributed a lot to it, my question in the future, you talked about adding or gaining extra value by that percentage of deeper marbling, and how you're going to tell that narrative whilst, if you like, differentiating yourself from your core product. When with Wagyu, you've got standards, it's set. With you, it seems like you're trailblazing. How are you going to do that?
We make, I mean, you know, the future of my business lies in higher, I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's completely eluding me. It's added value products, so charcuterie. Okay, we have a small charcuterie factory. If that works, we fill it, we'll build a bigger one because the margins on that is incredible. As regards the more marbling we put in it, I really don't think Asia is the one place in the world that understands meat far better. You were saying earlier 60%, it's 30%, it'll be 60%. I think I've read similar figures. You know, you heard what I said about UK retailers. They're not going to spend the money on meat unless something drastically changes in the UK. They are not going to spend money on meat. So it's a category, it's going nowhere. It's going to be a commodity. Fine, if you want to farm that way, if you can improve your efficiency and work within those constraints, great. And plenty of people do, plenty of people make a success of it. But if Asia is the growth in meat, then pushing the boundaries of what you're doing, it's kind of got to be right. And you know, we can take 10% out of it and sell at a higher price point. It doesn't necessarily devalue the core of what we do. We've just got, you know, the higher stuff goes to the market that wants to pay the most. To me, I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure I answered your question. Have I answered your question there, or have I gone off a tangent?
Thank you to these guys, because that was fantastic. They've come a long way. I think they're deeply jet lagged. They've done a fantastic job tonight. Thank you.